All right, let's go to this Queensland issue because we heard today parents in Queensland could be required to dob in their own children to police if they re-offend while out on bail under new laws being proposed by the Palaszczuk government. This radical measure is part of a suite of laws aimed at bringing youth crime under control in the Sunshine State following the horrific recent deaths of Kate Leadbeater, Batty Field, their unborn son Miles, and of course the aspiring police officer Jennifer Board. For more on this, I'm joined now from Brisbane by the opposition leader, the LNP's David Crisafulli. David, let's go to this package of reforms there from the Premier. She says it'll end this lawlessness in Queensland communities. We know they've been hit hard by youth crime. It was a real feature of last year's campaign. The Premier wouldn't give much ground on the issue of youth crime last year. Very much front and centre now. Has she just woken up or has the politics changed?
Well, it's their third crack in a year and a half, Peter, and what disappoints me is the one issue that could make the biggest difference, which is returning breach of bail, putting breach of bail as an offence in the Youth Justice Act. That's the one thing that they remain pig-headed about. Now, we've sought to take all the politics out of it and we've said, put forward your reforms, put forward your ideas and we'll back them. Now, rather than give the old, these are our 30 demands, otherwise we'll throw the toys out of the cot, we said we only have one thing we want to see, and that is we want to see breach of bail as an offence. And that's the one thing they won't give ground on. So, yep, we'll support these changes, but we will be back in here in this place, having to make more changes, but that's not the real issue. The real issue is that loved ones could be lost. Families can be torn apart. People have to have the trauma of telling a child that you're safe in your own home despite the fact some grub was in your house the night before. A young tradie will go out tomorrow morning to the front of their property, and it'll be in a suburb anywhere across Queensland, and the car that they're working their backside off to pay to make a crust isn't going to be there. And that won't be fixed until we make breach of bail an offence.
Give me your argument why breach of bail must be in the mix. Give us the argument for it.
In one sentence, it's do you want one car stolen or two? Because under this ridiculous law, there is no consequence for your action. So what do I mean by that? So a magistrate might say, OK, young Jimmy, you're going to be let out on bail, which is a privilege. These are your conditions. You have to live with Aunt Mary. You can't associate with Tommy, and you have to be in bed by 10 p.m. Now, under this ridiculously weak law, if a copper intercepts them doing any one of those things, until they commit another offence, they're free to continue on their way. That is absurd. There's got to be consequences for your actions. And we have a law that's been watered down so much to appease a minority of people who do not reflect the community's views. Now, we're not going to stand in the way of the changes, and if there are suggestions put forward that can improve things, we'll be responsible and mature. But I would love the government to swallow its pride and say the changes they have made over the years have created a situation of lawlessness. Everyone deserves a second chance, but we are talking about a group of offenders who are on their 15th, 20th, 30th chance, and the revolving door has got to stop.
But David Crisafulli, being let out on bail, even with conditions, is their second chance. Breaking bail conditions is not a second chance. It's problematic because, as you say, it gives this sense that there is no penalty for young people, and young people who offend often become middle-aged and older people who offend. That's why we have an issue in this country with recidivism. What's the government's argument against what you want? Well, I don't think anyone watching tonight would say that what you're asking for is not reasonable.
And Peter, that's what's most disappointing is I hope it's not for the sake of politics, because if it is, you've got the situation that someone's family is going to be torn apart because of pig-headedness, and we don't want to do the na-na-na-na-na if they agree to it. Quite on the contrary, we are going to continue to advocate for it.
What's her argument to allow them to break bail like this?
We don't know, and we continue to be told that the system, it won't be improved by having that as a condition. That's a condition in my mind that sets up a consequence for action. Now, if the Premier's got the ticket to come on your show, you can put that question to her. I'll continue to do it on the floor of Parliament. Now, despite this being so urgent 2 weeks ago, we still haven't seen legislation. Tomorrow's the last sitting day. It's certainly not going to be passed tomorrow. So in the meantime, families get torn apart, and this is real. And you're hearing about it right across Queensland, and change needs to happen, and we will continue to advocate for that change.
All right, well, Anastasia Palaszczuk, I'll say again, as I always do, you're very welcome to come on this show, but also say to the Queensland Press Gallery, here are some questions that must be answered on behalf of all of these families by the Premier, because I don't think it passes the pub test. Just quickly, David, I've got to ask you too about these emails, more revelations about the private email used by the Premier, we're told, to discuss appointments with a minister in relation to government jobs. I have to say, this would be a breach of pretty serious rules at a federal level. Why is it allowed at a state level?
Well, it's not allowed. And Peter, you know these rules better than anyone. If you are conducting business on a private email account, it's fair game, and it's part of the Records Act, and that's the way it should be. Now, we aren't asking the Premier to have to bare her soul on everything that's in her private email accounts, far from it. But we know there's about 20 emails that are classified as business emails on her private account. One of them involves discussing a Director General, a highly paid position, and whether or not that person reflect the political values of the Minister and the Premier. Now, I'm sorry, that sounds a lot like government business to me. Now, yep, that's code for let's do a little bit of underhand dealing. Now, the Premier could have cleared this up today. We asked a dozen questions in there. I've never seen such short answers. But unless we are serious about wanting to get a state that is transparent and accountable, we are going to keep harassing on this one, because there is a cover-up if the Premier is not prepared to say, these are the emails, this is why I haven't conducted myself in an inappropriate manner. Otherwise, it smells, and we'll keep asking those questions.
David Crisafulli, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Peter.